Advancing life, liberty, and family. Liberty Counsel has been making a big difference in 2011. We're going to be talking about it today on Faith and Freedom. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Shawn Akers, the vice president of Middle Eastern Affairs for Liberty Counsel. And Shawn, later in the week, we're going to get to some of the new ministry opportunities of which you've had a part in with some of these outreaches to Israel. We've got new programs in America and Israel. We'll talk about that later in the week. We've been talking so far about some of the categories: religious freedom, life and family. We've already focused on religious freedom, sanctity of human life, and now let's focus on the family and look at what we've been doing in 2011. Amazing report that we put together. In fact, when we were working on this, it was amazing just to look back at 2011. I knew we were busy in 2011, but this really shows you some of the major issues that we've been involved with across the country and even around the world in Israel.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Matt, when I was here and watched your involvement in these things, but it wasn't until I saw it all compiled. And frankly, as I'm going through it, it really is a representative list. There's so much more that was done than it actually even made it into the list. But the list, even as it stands, is a very impressive one.
This is just a sample. I mean, this is not exhaustive. If we were to list exhaustively all the different matters, it would be a book. But literally, this is just a sample of things in the religious liberty category, a sample of them in the sanctity of human life, and a sample of them in family. And we don't even have time to go into the new ministry outreaches in terms of what they ultimately do. We just basically name them. So let's get right to it and move over to some of the issues in the family we've covered in the first 2 days this week. These other areas, let's move over to the family. These are basically areas in which we're fighting in the courts or doing some kind of matter, trying to resolve them prior to courts, what we call non-litigated issues. In the family, we filed an amicus brief in the federal court supporting the Federal Defense of Marriage Act that defines marriage as the union of one man and one woman. You remember that President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder refused to defend this federal law. And in fact, not only did they refuse to defend it, they tried to undermine it in order to advance their homosexual, so-called LGBT agenda. So Liberty Counsel actually was able to file an amicus brief defending the substance of this particular law. This is one of my favorite because one of the things we have to understand is that law and policy are often two different things. Law is made up of policy, but policies can work directly against law. In this case, we had a law, the Defense of Marriage Act, that protects marriage, and the administration adopted a policy that ran exactly contrary to that by saying, you know what, we're not going to defend that. So in the absence, this power abhors a vacuum. In the absence of the government doing what it is told it has to do. This was Eric Holder's job. Liberty Counsel stood up and filed a friend of the court brief to stand with others to defend a law that the government should have defended itself. Well, we also filed an amicus brief in a case where the ruling went the right way in the Ohio Supreme Court that protected a biological mother from losing custody to a previous same-sex partner. So she is the biological and birth mother of this child. She entered into a lesbian relationship, separated from that, and then this lesbian, former partner, wanted to obtain custody. Ultimately, the court went the right way and would not go that way. We ultimately filed a brief on the merits, siding with the biological and birth mother that she should have custody, and that's what the court ultimately ruled.
Matt, that's one of those consequences of these civil union and homosexual marriage, same-sex marriage laws that states have passed here and there. We're going to see this pattern over and over again. It is so important in these early cases to establish the legal precedent, because if you weren't there doing what you're doing now, correcting that later can become almost impossible. That's how important these first moves are.
In many of these cases, you have two women coming together, and then one becomes a Christian. They leave that lifestyle, and they're the mother of this child. And then this other active lesbian wants to take the child away. And it puts, the child right in the crosshairs. And obviously, this is a very serious issue. So we are very pleased with the Ohio Supreme Court ruling. Also, another major case. This was at a federal court of appeals And this went through the Federal Court of Appeals twice, so we filed more than one brief there. Once it went back, we filed a brief, and then the individuals asked the United States Supreme Court to get involved. They refused and allowed the case to stand. This case is involving two men from New York, and they wanted to ultimately have Louisiana recognize their parents' rights. Both of them, they wanted to have both men listed on the birth certificate as parents. Louisiana doesn't recognize same-sex unions. Louisiana said no. They ultimately filed suit. The Federal Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Louisiana, and the U.S. Supreme Court allowed that decision to stand. This would have gone the wrong way. It would have been a big decision the other way, because it would have then it would have made states like Louisiana and others that have laws that say same-sex unions are not recognized to recognize those unions because of some other out-of-state matter, such as New York. So Liberty Counsel was very involved in that, and the court went the right way.
You know, we have to be so – you've talked about eternal vigilance repeatedly. And this is one of those places that you have to keep your eyes open. This was not just a frontal attack here. This was not a group coming in and saying we're going to force through the Commerce Clause or whatever gay marriage on Louisiana. They were going to try to do it in a backdoor way, but it was recognized, it was stopped, and we got to play a part in that.
And we also filed suit against the New York law that adopted same-sex marriage under the open meetings violation, because they did a lot of strong arm twisting behind closed doors. They locked out the public. They met in quorum, and they went behind closed doors, which is impermissible under New York law. We filed a lawsuit, and the court has now said that our lawsuit can proceed. The state defendants, Cuomo and Bloomberg and others with the state, they ultimately wanted to get this case dismissed. They were not successful, so now we will proceed forward with depositions, which will include the governor, Mario Cuomo of New York, and the mayor, Michael Bloomberg, and others, including the president of the Senate, who, by the way, is a Republican.
Now, that's some exciting litigation. That
will be interesting. The remedy is that if we ultimately win at the end of the day, which I think they violated the open meetings law, is that they'd have to start all over again and repass this.
That's right.
Allowing the people to have input and participate in the process, which they did not the first go-around.
You know, the Bible says that the guilty flee when no one pursues. When you do something in the dark like that, it lets people know that you thought you were guilty in doing it in the first place. It's so nice to see us shining the light there, especially in such a public way.
That's right. It was very good.
Here's another one, Matt, that I tell you, this is one of my favorites. We have reached so many times into the public school realm, and there was a teacher in Mount Dora, Florida. Tell us about that case.
Yeah, in Mount Dora, this teacher had been teaching for 22 years, was actually recognized as Teacher of the Year. And on his Facebook, after New York passed the same-sex marriage law, he, on his own personal Facebook, not as a teacher, stated his personal opinion, how he was opposed to that law. Well, the school then ultimately came down on him, suspended him. We got involved. He was reinstated, and everything was put back as usual. But they were going to come down on him with a heavy hand and intimidate him. And this case went national. So Mount Dora School District was on the national map. Jerry Buell was actually reinstated, and it was a good result at the very end. But otherwise, if we hadn't been there, Jerry Buell, Teacher of the Year, he would have been vilified. They would have tried to silence him. They would have punished him. Liberty Counsel reversed the situation.
It's just amazing the impact that we've had as we look through the year, especially in the areas of protecting those things that are most important to the common families in the United States, man.
We also filed a brief at the Supreme Court decision to come down in 2012 regarding broadcast decency standards and many, many other activities as well that we've done. You can read about this in our year-end 2011 report. I encourage you to do so. We'll continue to talk about this the rest of the week, but it is something that I think that will encourage you. Go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org. You can sign up for the Liberty Alert email, the Grassroots Action email as well, both of them right there on the front page of the website, and the Liberator newsletter, which would ultimately give you this year-end report and other informational matters as well. Remember, Liberty Counsel, with your year-end contribution, you can go to Liberty Counsel's website and give an online credit card contribution right there on the website. You can also call us at 1-800-671-1776 and give your year-end contribution over the phone or send it in the mail. Pray for Liberty Counsel. Stand for us as we continue to advance liberty.